In this video, I'm going to be Pokemon Platinum with the Lucario-line. I'm honestly really excited about this one. I think it's going to do really well. Well, after it evolves from a Riolu, because we are going to be stuck here for quite some time. At the beginning of the year, I played some Pokemon that revolve around the friendship mechanic, both Heatran and Lopunny, and now I'm coming back to do another one here at the end of the year. This time though, I have an advantage on my side, which is the fact that Riolu and Lucario have a medium slow growth rate, which is one of the best for a solo challenge, if not the best. That means I'm going to be leveling up quickly in the early game and slower once I get to the late game, but that matters much less because I have access to so many rare candies. For base stats, Riolu starts with 40 HP, defense and special defense, 70 attack, 35 special attack, and 60 speed. This is a base stat total of 285, which is the same as a Pokemon like Paris. Luckily for me, unlike Paris, I do not have a 4x weakness because Riolu is a mono fighting type. It gains the steel typing when it evolves to Lucario. Also, I am going to talk about the evolution right now because the glow up is kind of ridiculous. Lucario's base stats increase by 30 in its HP, defense, speed, and special defense. Its attack increases by 40, but its special attack increases by 80. This is a massive jump for its base stat total, reaching 525, which is the same as all fully evolved starters. With a medium slow growth rate, it does feel like this Pokemon is sort of a two-stage starter Pokemon. Although its evolution method is much different, I'm going to need to reach 220 friendship, and it will also need to be daytime, so I had to make sure to change some of my emulator settings before starting this run. Typically I just let it choose the time of day based on my real-time clock, but in this case that's not going to be a good solution. Okay, let's go through the abilities because I have a choice between two with this line. Number 1 is Steadfast. This increases the Pokemon's speed stat by 1 stage whenever it flinches. And the second ability is Inner Focus, which is also related to the flinching mechanic, in this case preventing the Pokemon from being affected by it. Boosting speed might be good in the late game if I was playing the whole game with a Riolu, but since I'm evolving to a Lucario and I get base 90 speed, that will be more than enough for all of the enemy Pokemon. Remember, the enemy doesn't get EVs and I'm going to be over-leveled by the end of the game, so I will be moving first against all the Pokemon there. Alright, so let's go through Riolu's move pool and see what I'm working with in the early game. It starts with Quick Attack, Foresight, and Endure. If this was a normal type Pokemon, this would be a decent set, but as a fighting type, it's not great. Luckily, through level up, it gets Counter at level 6, not a great move, but then Force Palm at level 11, this is a great move. For all of you like me who come from Generation 1, 2, and 3, you might not know what Force Palm does, so I looked it up for you. It inflicts damage and has a 30% chance of paralyzing the target. It's essentially a weaker version of Body Slam, and it's a fighting type move, so it'll have an effective power of 90. This is going to be a great move for Riolu. It's also definitely going to be my answer for Rourke. Beyond that, it gets Feint, Reversal, Screech, and Copycat. I can't see Reversal being very useful. After all, I've found a lot of niche uses for it in my runs this year. Its TM and HM learn set is quite diverse. I've also included its tutor moves, but I won't be using too many of those. After all, I will have evolved by the time I get access to them. I used Pokemon Database's attack type coverage calculator to see what moves would make the most sense together once I've evolved into a Lucario, and it seems like Rock, Steel, and Ground are going to give me neutral coverage against everything in the game. This leaves one open slot for Swords Dance, which both Riolu and Lucario can learn. And if I've learned anything after a year of playing Pokemon solo challenges in Platinum version, Swords Dance is definitely the best move in the game because Calm Mind and Bulk Up are walled off in the post game. That's everything we need to know about these species. Now let's get into the playthrough and see how Riolu does with the early stages of the game. I fought all the trainers in the early game so that I could level up to 11 as fast as possible to gain access to the move Force Palm. This is a really fantastic move for the early game, and I teach it in the place of Endure. I continue fighting trainers north of Jubilife City, and then I grab the Quick Claw. This isn't actually going to be useful for the playthrough, but I grabbed it just in case later into the game there would be fast flying types, but don't worry, I have enough speed for this entire run. Outside Jubilife City, I fight the rival. In this case, he's got a Starly, but Force Palm just completely destroys it, and then it continues doing decently well two-shotting the Chimchar. On the rest of Route 203, there are a total of 5 trainers. I battle them all to gain experience. This brings Riolu up to level 14 by the time it reaches Orberg Gate. There are 2 trainers in here, which I also battle, and I think at this point I'm going a little bit overboard on the training, but I want to gain levels quickly so that I also gain friendship. Since Riolu already has more than 100, every time it levels up, it's only going to gain 3 points, which unfortunately is the fastest way to grow this stat in the early game. None of the friendship raising victory-raising berries are available in the early game. I can't buy any vitamins or pick any up off of the ground. The massage person is available in Veilstone City later into the playthrough, and walking levels your friendship up so slowly, it takes 128 steps to get a 50% chance for the whole party to increase their friendship by 1. This is going to be relevant later once we get the bike. I want to do a test to see how quickly I can gain friendship just by biking around in an open area, but until then I'm going to be relying on levels. After completing the 2 trainers in Orberg Mine, I head back to the gym to face 2 more trainers. This brings Riolu almost up to level 17. Seriously, the medium fast growth rate is so good. I almost went right into the battle against Rourke, but then I noticed that Force Palm only has 4 PP, and it would be disastrous to fight him now and then have to use Quick Attack to knock out one of his Pokemon if I need more than 4 uses of this move. So I backtrack to the Pokemon Center, heal up, and then I'm ready for my first gym battle. Rourke's lead is of course Geodude. I go for Force Palm and it doesn't one-shot. I'm so glad I went back to the Pokemon Center. That was definitely the right choice. I knock it out on the second turn after he uses a potion, and then Cranidos comes in. I was really surprised when I knocked it out in a single hit. I didn't realize its defense stat is so much lower when compared with Geodude. Of course Onix is last and it has the highest defense stat, but it is a trash Pokemon so it doesn't matter, and with that I take my first gym victory. I always do a Mart trip right after this, and I want to draw your attention to one item that I purchase here, not the repels, instead the escape rope. I found that when playing Abomasnow, I didn't have one of these when picking up the Earthquake TM, and I don't want to make that mistake today. It's going to save just a little bit of overworld walking time, and at least 1 repel. Inside the Ravaged Path, I pick up the TM for Rock Tomb, and I'm going to teach this to Riolu right away, in the place of Feint, which I am just not going to use once in this playthrough. Now if you're wondering, I am keeping Foresight on my moveset intentionally. I ran into problems with Lopunny against Fantina when I didn't have it, but at level 19 I have the chance to learn Reversal, and I decided that Rock Tomb would be enough for Fantina, so I'll let go of Foresight now. That brings us to Commander Mars. This fight theoretically should be very easy. I have super effective Rock Tomb on the Zubat, which one-shots, and then Force Palm for the Purugly. It moves first with Fake Out, which does not cause me to flinch because I have Inner Focus, and then I use Force Palm doing massive damage. It just barely hangs on through my hit, but it doesn't matter anyways because it can't do enough damage. I survive, and with that I've defeated Commander Mars. Okay, so Eterna Forest is next. The lady with the Pachirisu can be problematic, and of course she paralyzes me right away with Spark, but I focus the electric type down, and then the bugs are easy to clean up. Alright, so the next section of the game is really critical for me with Riolu. When I evolve into Lucario, I can learn Swords Dance at level 33, but if you check Riolu's set, it cannot learn this move. So if I don't have the friendship to evolve into a Lucario at, let's say, level 31 or 32, I am going to miss this move until I get to the move reminder in Pastoria City. I could tell right now if I go on minimum battles and just beat all of the required trainers, I am going to level up too quickly and lose out on the good setup move. Battling optional trainers doesn't make a lot of sense right now because it won't accelerate my progress, it's just going to level me up faster and then cause the same issue. But I can go to the end of the forest, have Cheryl depart, and she'll give me the Soothe Bell, which I can give to Riolu to increase the amount of friendship it gains every time it levels up. With this item I backtrack into the forest to defeat some trainers to level up more. By the time I'm in the gym, my friendship is around 167, so I still have quite far to go. I had to decide between taking the Soothe Bell into the fight against Gardenia and potentially getting more friendship, or using a more useful item like a Cherry Berry. But I realized I don't have a Cherry Berry, so I'd have to backtrack to get one, and I didn't feel that would be worth the time investment. I made the decision to go into the fight against her without the ideal held item. Let's see how this went. Her first Pokemon is Turtwig. My best move against it is going to be Force Palm, and it does not do enough to knock it out. Actually, quite far from that. Luckily I do get Paralysis, but this doesn't prevent the Turtwig from setting up with Reflect, lowering the physical damage I can deal, so it survives and then starts taking very little damage every turn. It sets up Sunny Day, takes more damage, does about a quarter to me with Razor Leaf before it eventually goes down. This was not a good start to the fight. The Cherrim that's next sets up Safeguard, Force Palm does what looks like less than half, and then I run out of uses of this move. So my mind was focused on my PP when I was going up against a trainer with tough Pokemon like Rourke, but when going up against Gardenia, I completely forgot to check in with this metric and didn't heal. As a result of this, while I do beat the Cherrim, my health is just too low and the Roserade finishes me off. Okay, I'm forced to backtrack, so I might as well go back and grab a Cherry Berry now. I also spent a little bit of time grinding against wild Pokemon to level up to 28 over the next damage rounding threshold. Alright, so what's it going to take to beat Gardenia? Well, in this case, I just crit the Turtwig, preventing it from setting up Reflect. As a result, I am able to two-shot the Cherrim, although it looks like I just barely got that damage range. I think if I was level 27, it would have survived my second hit and allowed her to use her Super Potion. Her Ace is all that's left. I go for Force Palm, doing about a third. It causes paralysis. Roserade doesn't move. I take it down to yellow health. It eats its Citrus Berry, paralyzes me with Stun Spore, but I'm prepared for this with a Cherry Berry. With the status condition removed, Roserade goes for it again, giving me more time to just attack, and as a result, I defeat Gardenia. Alright, so now it is time to get as much friendship as is possible. One way to get more friendship is teaching your Pokemon TMs. This only increases friendship by 1 point, but I might as well do it now. I can teach Return. I don't think this move is going to be useful long term in the playthrough. I can also head back to the old chateau and pick up the TM for Substitute, which I'm also going to teach, this time in the place of Reversal. While that move has been quite useful this year, especially with Pokemon like Heracross in Crystal version, I don't think it's going to be helpful in this playthrough. By the way, I'm making a mistake here, which some of you will probably notice. I should have given myself the Soothe Bell before teaching these TMs, because that would have doubled the gains that I received from each one of these items. Commander Jupiter's next. I thought that the Zubat had Toxic like Commander Mars's, but it doesn't. It just goes for Wing Attack and breaks my Substitute right away. This is a bad first turn. I use Rock Tomb to knock the flying Pokemon out and move on to the Skuntank. Once again, I go for Substitute, and this time it actually works out for me because I block Screech. In the end, this is very important because the Skuntank breaks my Substitute and then takes me down to lowish health before I finish it off. If my defense was 2 stages lower, I definitely would have fainted there and had my second reset. With that cleared, I can now pick up the bike, and I am going to do a little bit of a test here. In the city, there's a decent amount of vertical space where I can just bike back and forth to gain friendship. When I came into this playthrough, I figured that this would be much slower than just battling trainers, so I wanted to give it a try and see how much friendship I gain per second when just biking back and forth. I was really surprised by the results because it takes only 4 seconds to gain a single friendship point in ideal circumstances, and in other cases it'll take a little bit more, like maybe 8 or 12 seconds. Remember, there is a chance to gain the friendship after a certain number of steps. That said, after just a little bit of this, I realized that it's going to be the most effective way to evolve, so I just stayed here biking back and forth for a long time, gaining as much friendship as I could, all the way up to 210. From there, I figured the experience I'm going to gain on mandatory trainers will be enough to level me up, gaining the remaining friendship required. I'm actually going to be a Lucario before I face Fantina. That's something I didn't think was going to be possible, and I guess my expectations for friendship evolutions were set quite low using Bunnery early on in the year. It starts with 0 friendship. That thing hates its trainer. Things are obviously much easier when you have the standard base friendship of 70. Inside Wayward Cave, I pick up the TM for Earthquake, and then right before Hearthome City, I'm at 219 friendship. I bike around a little bit, get to 220, fight one more trainer, and then Riolu evolves into Lucario. As I head into the city, I want to bring up the evolution graphic one more time and just talk about this thing's special attack. It's really great that we have a steel type that isn't a physical attacker, but I also think this is a major disadvantage for Lucario in a solo challenge. The fact that so much of its base stats are centralized around its special attack really destroys the synergy that it has at level 32 when I level it up with a rare candy to get Swords Dance. I teach the setup move in the place of Return because I need Rock Tomb for the ghosts and I want to use Force Palm throughout the next section of the game. The problem is now I'm going to want to only have physical moves on my set, and teaching a special move just feels kind of bad. As a result, the plus 80 points that it gets in its special attack are essentially going to be wasted for the rest of the playthrough. It's a little bit of a frustration, but I think I'm still in a good position to do decently well with this Pokemon. Let's jump into Fantina and see how this battle goes. Her first Pokemon is Dusclops. It's obviously Dusclops. Yes, people have asked me, this is exactly like Venomoth. It's so bad and it's slow that I can set up Substitute right away, and then it tries Will-O-Wisp a total of 4 times in a row, not knowing that it cannot use this move against me when I have my defense set up. This allows me to max out my attack stat with Swords Dance and then one-shot her remaining Pokemon using Rock Tomb. My fighting type has absolutely no problems against this ghost type specialist. The rival in Hearthome City is generally one of the harder battles against him in the game. I didn't even heal going into this fight. I figured I didn't need it because I can set up Substitute, then use Swords Dance once or twice while the Staravia just sets up with Double Team, and then I can go on the offense with Rock Tomb. Luckily for me, Evasion doesn't cause me to miss, so I knock it out, and from there things are simple. I can spam Force Palm and defeat his remaining Pokemon. Okay, so let's talk about the Steel type from Generation 2 until Generation 5. In these games, it resists almost every typing in the game. The only 2 types that deal neutral damage to it are Water and Electric. It of course takes super effective damage from Fire, Fighting, and Ground. The major changes that occurred in Generation 6 made the type a little bit weaker defensively because it takes neutral damage from Ghost and Dark type moves as well. But that's not the case in this game. The only weakness this typing has are Ground, Fire, and Fighting type moves. 2 of those typings do not have specialists until much later in the game with Bertha and Flint, but coming up immediately is Maylene, and she could potentially be a problem. I was, however, convinced that I could just rely on Swords Dance for her because this move is so powerful. In Solaceon Town, I pick up a PP up because later on I'm going to get close combat and I want to be ready for that. North of the town, I pick up a rare candy and then I cut a tree, fighting Black Belt Gregory, picking up the Fist Plate, which increases the power of fighting type moves by 20%. This brings Force Palm's effective power up from 90 to 108. Just before Veilstone City, I have to fight Dennis. Yes, I am always going to talk about Dennis. He is one of the scariest NPCs in Pokemon Platinum. His first Pokemon is a Gligar, which takes very little damage from Rock Tomb. I have to 2-shot it, which is always so annoying with Rock Tomb because this move just loves to miss. This is probably one of my least favorite moves in the game. I know you all get frustrated whenever I use moves like Hypnosis or Grass Whistle. Those moves do not bother me. This move really bothers me. Once the Gligar goes down, the Buizel is easier to manage, and then there's only a Drifblim left, so of course I have to miss with Rock Tomb before finally knocking it out. This fight got a little bit closer than I was hoping. Before Veilstone City, there's only one more mandatory trainer, and I had to go in with 32 hit points because I didn't have any healing items left. And I really didn't want to backtrack to the Moo Moo Milk place. It is so far away. It was at this point though that I had started to realize just how busted Lucario is. This thing is completely destroying Platinum. Its typing is great, its moveset is great, and its stats are good, even though it's really overinvested in special attack like I mentioned before. Where is this thing gonna run into problems? Well, the fighting gym, that's where it's gonna run into problems. I get defeated by this random black belt, Raphael. Also, the Raphael music from Baldur's Gate, my wife loves that track so much, we sing it all the time together. It is so good. If you haven't played that game, just go check out the track. It's worth your time. I come back into the gym, get my revenge against Raphael, and then this random Heracross on Black Belt Jeffrey's team just does so much damage to Lucario. Luckily, I get a paralysis and it drops the ball using Leer, so I win, but I don't really feel like I deserved it. At this point in the run, I had started to think that Maylene was going to cause some serious problems. Her first Pokemon is Meditite. It goes for Fake Out, causing me to flinch, and then I realized something weird had happened. My ability has somehow switched to Steadfast. I'm going to talk about this in depth after the battle, but for now I just want to focus on the actual outcome of this fight. In this case, having my speed raised and the fact that I flinched is actually a detriment to Lucario because it was already faster than all of Maylene's Pokemon. Losing one turn like this and taking a little bit of damage is just a bad thing. I set up once with Swords Dance, Meditite uses Drain Punch, taking me down under half health, and then I figured I had to attack. I use Earthquake against her lead, Meditite. Oh yeah, I taught Earthquake. This move is really good. I should have put it on my set a little bit earlier. Of course, the Meditite faints. I move on to the Machoke, which also goes down to a single Earthquake, and because of that, I was sure that I was going to win. Of course, her Lucario is no match for mine, and that gives me the 4th badge. Okay, so now while watching some B-roll, let's take a brief moment and talk about what happened with my ability. In Generation 3, abilities are stored as a bit flag, which when set to false will be equal to the first ability, and when set to true will be equal to the second ability. In Generation 4, they changed this by having the ability stored in a single byte on RAM. This allows each Pokemon to have more variety available to it, and it also allows them to later incorporate things like hidden abilities. I figured if the pre-evolution had its ability set to something that the post-evolution would also have, that the ability would remain constant across the evolution. However, that doesn't end up being the case. When Riolu evolves, its ability can change to the other available ability, which is Steadfast. And that's what took place today. If you're wondering if it was some glitch with my software, I was also wondering about that, so I went on Google and did some researching, and I found at least one other person asking questions about their Riolu changing abilities, so I assume this is some mechanic in the game that I'm just unaware of. If you have more information about this, please let me know in the comments because I am very curious as to what's going on. Especially because it impacts how Pokemon rank in my tier list if they're going to have their ideal ability switched away whenever I evolve them. In this case, I think Inner Focus is the better ability, just preventing flinches altogether because Lucario doesn't need the speed. But overall, the ability switch isn't really going to impact its abilities throughout this run, whereas for other Pokemon, having their ability taken away might dramatically impact their performance. Also, I wouldn't put it past my overlay just making some completely weird mistake around this, so stay tuned for future installments where I will talk about this ability switching and give you more information on it as I get it. On my way heading south, I pick up a PPF, which will be important for close combat, which is coming up very soon. Then, as I approach Pastoria City, I fight this trainer, and I just want to mention the fact that Aerial Ace is not a move that Lucario can learn. I really figured it would have access to it, and that's really going to make the foggy area just a little bit more annoying for me today. In Pastoria City, I go up against the rival. This fight is trivial once again because I can set up with Swords Dance and then sweep his team. I don't even use Rock Tomb on the Staravia for the chance that it would miss. Instead, I just use Force Palm 4 times, even on the Roselia, and I get one-shots. With him defeated, it's now time to take on Crasher Wake. This has been one of the most difficult gym battles for me overall in Pokemon Platinum so far. That said, if your Pokemon is not weak to the Gyarados and it has a setup move, I can generally spend some time here boosting my stats and then striking back for massive damage. That said, I'm taking neutral damage from Waterfall, so I can only do this for 2 turns, boosting my attack to +3 before I have to strike back. Rock Tomb luckily comes through, hitting the Gyarados, knocking it out in a single turn. Quagsire's next, I go for Force Palm, getting another one-shot, and that leads me to the Floatzel. Now, please observe the fact that this water-type speed stat is 96 and my Lucario's is 97. I'm guaranteed to move first, Force Palm does massive damage, and Crasher Wake's Ace faints. The experience from this Pokemon levels Lucario up to level 42, giving me essentially my prize for the battle, which is close combat. Let's reflect on Lucario's time right now. It's just over an hour and 10 minutes. I think there's the possibility to get Platinum playthroughs under 2 hours. 2 years ago, I would have thought that that was completely impossible. 1 year ago, when I started this series, I also would have thought that that was impossible, or maybe in the distant future. But I think Lucario would be able to do it today if it started fully evolved and didn't lose time as a Riolu. All of that said, we should talk about the best time that I have in Pokemon Platinum so far, my personal best, which is with Giratina, and it has a time of 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think that Lucario can beat that today in this playthrough. And what would possibly cause it to lose time in the next section of the game, because Byron is the next gym leader, and I am going to crush him. Well, this is going to cause it to lose time. I walk up this ramp, misjudge my movement, and then have to fight this double battle. And this is absolutely awful. Because I don't have Aerial Ace, and I also skipped Defog, I am missing so many hits, causing my Earthquake to just miss the Raichu over and over again as I knock my allies out. Then when it eventually deals damage to the electric type, it just barely survives. I could not believe this. Also, because of close combat's downside, I didn't want to use it against the Gyarados, so I'm using Rock Tomb, and its accuracy is bad, as has been well established. This fight takes a really long time, but eventually I do win. That said, I walk up the next ramp and run into the next trainer, and this one does not end in a victory victory for me, I do have to black out here and go back to Solaceon Town. On my way heading north, I run into a spinning trainer, which I dodged both times successfully in the past. This is so disastrous. Making things even worse, there is Bird Keeper Brianna, who has a Hoot Hoot and a Noctowl. I am using Rock Tomb against them. It takes so long, but eventually I do knock them out and make my way into Celestic Town. For most Pokemon, that section of the game wouldn't have been too bad, but for Lucario, I am looking for drama because otherwise there's not really that much to talk about. Cyrus is easy to crush, and with Surf, I then go to the Floroma Meadow to grab a PP up, as well as a rare candy. This leads me to Canalave Town and the rival battle on the bridge. Once again, my Lucario is faster than all of his Pokemon. I set up twice with Swords Dance, and then I just sweep. Yeah, not even one of his Pokemon survives one of my hits. A thought crossed my mind during this battle, which is maybe the Torterra team would have been a little bit more difficult to fight later in the game because I wouldn't have super effective damage against his ace. But I do think even with neutral damage at +3, I would still have enough to knock out the turtle. But I do think that even with +3 from Swords Dance, I would still be able to knock out the tortoise. Okay, so let's head into the Steel Gym and fight all the trainers that are normally really difficult. The first guy is Black Belt Ricky. He has a Steelix. Yeah, I crush him. The second guy is really annoying. He has a Magnemite and he always catches me as I run by, but he doesn't today. Next is Ace Trainer Caesar with his Scissor, and no problems here either. Then there's the Magnemite guy, he's not a problem, but this Steelix guy sometimes is. He's got a lot of rock moves. In this case, he doesn't matter, he's just irrelevant. There's the Bronzong lady, who is sometimes really bad, but in this case, she's not. So with all those trainers out of the way, I have made it to Byron in absolutely dominant fashion. For this battle, I think we should all stare at Lucario's effective powers. Against the Magneton, with close combat using the Fist Plate and the same type attack bonus, I have an effective power of 432. Obviously, I one-shot. Next is Steelix, still 432 effective power. And if you thought that wasn't good enough, against the Bastiodon, where I have 4 times damage, I now have an effective power of 864. Because of this, I completely obliterate it and earn myself the 6th badge. Easy as expected. The prize for this battle is the TM for Flash Cannon, which is a steel type move that deals special damage. When I initially looked at Lucario's set, I was thinking that Flash Cannon as well as Aura Sphere would be perfect for it, but I've already said no to Aura Sphere and I didn't even mention it, and now I am once again going to say no to a special move, keeping my set purely physical. I should spend a little bit more time though drawing attention to Aura Sphere before we move on, because that fighting type move also bypasses accuracy checks, which I did not know when filming the whole foggy area of the game. I'm sure at least one of you has already made a comment about that, so you can go and edit the comment now. The next section has a theme, and that is Golbat. With close combat and an Earthquake, my best move against flying type Pokemon is Rock Tomb, and with low accuracy and low base power, because it's from the start of the game, I'm not able to do very much damage to these flyers. The logic for me is that I should be using Swords Dance to boost the power of Rock Tomb so that when this move actually hits, I do knock out the opponent successfully. But this has a disadvantage as well, because most Golbat know moves that can confuse you. This means that self-inflicted damage is going to do more damage after I've set up. I was lucky to make it through these battles without any resets or blackouts, but they were all really frustrating and generally a little bit slower than I might have liked. Now, after defeating Byron, it is technically possible to get access to Rock Slide, but I didn't want to go to Mount Coronet and then have to backtrack there later anyway, so I was skipping that move in favor of just having a little bit more concise playthrough. After all, Lucario is doing great, and I don't want to bleed time at any point throughout this run from here on out, and that made me start considering the option of skipping rare candies. Up until this point in Platinum, I have collected every single rare candy that I knew about during each playthrough. I wanted to make sure that my Pokemon always made it to the late game at a very high level so that I could stomp Cynthia, because in casual playthroughs she has caused me so many problems. But of my last 3 or 4 playthroughs, Lucario is the first candidate that feels like it is able to skip rare candies and still get a fantastic time with minimal resets. Up until this point in the playthrough, I've collected a total of 12. I used 1 to evolve into Lucario, and I'm going to use 10 to go up from level 50 to 60 before Candice. Also here, when I hit level 51, I have the chance to learn Extreme Speed, and I think this is actually a more consistent option against all the Golbats, so I'll teach it in the place of Rock Tomb. I now don't have an answer for Ghosts with Levitate, but I won't fight any until I get access to Rock Slide. Okay, so at level 60, let's face Candice. Her first Pokemon is Sneasel, and it's really not that good against Lucario, so I could take my time here to set up, but I figured just one Swords Dance was going to be enough. Close Combat knocks out her first Pokemon in a single hit, and it feels kind of unfair once again with 864 power. Piloswine goes down to Close Combat, Abomasnow goes down to Close Combat, that leaves only Frostlass, but it does have Snow Cloak, and due to the weather I don't have a guaranteed chance of hitting it even with Earthquake. Luckily in this case the evasion doesn't matter, and Earthquake also gets a critical hit, completely destroying her ace. Into the Veilstone Galactic building we go. I'm gonna skip the rare candy here because it takes a little bit of time to access, and I could also save time by not fighting these trainers individually, instead doing a double battle with Earthquake. With them out of the way, Cyrus is next. Ice Punch does almost nothing to me. I set up to +4 and then sweep his team. Honestly, probably a little bit of overkill. I was trying to get extreme speed very powerful so that I could knock the Crobat out in one hit. +2 probably would have just been fine. Golbat is still a tiny nuisance against Commander Saturn, but extreme speed is able to hold its weight, and luckily it didn't get confused. But these flying type Pokemon are soon not going to be an issue anymore, because inside of Mount Coronet I can pick up the TM for Rock Slide, which I teach right away in the place of extreme speed. And now it is time to crush some Golbats. One goes down on this random Grunt's team, another one goes down for this random Grunt, and then against the double battle with Commander Mars and Jupiter, I can crush both of their Golbats using Rock Slide. Also, I set up to +6 here, and I just want to mention the fact that Lucario is such a beast. I've been saying this over and over again, but please look at this. It's one-shotting Bronzor with Rock Slide, it's one-shotting their aces with Rock Slide, and because this move hits both opponents' Pokemon, it's able to clear the field every turn without knocking out my allies' Pokemon. That's not always a good thing. Sometimes if you knock his Munchlax out, he actually sends in better Pokemon and it helps more with the battle. Either way, it doesn't matter. Lucario doesn't need help. Now you might expect me to hype up Cyrus in the Distortion world, but no, actually, Lucario is a beast. I don't use rare candies before this battle, I've skipped a bunch, and his Houndoom just burns me right away. So I am going to take my second reset there, but it was very fast and entirely player error. Instead, I should just use Earthquake right away and knock out the Houndoom. He sends in Gyarados second. I can take a little bit of time here to use one Swords Dance, boosting my attack to +1, and then I knock out the Flying type because its Earthquakes deal almost half. Beyond that, I am faster than all of his Pokemon, yes, both the Crobat and the Weavile. So Lucario again crushes its way to a victory, and with that, I am heading towards Volkner. Before Sunny Shore City, that is actually really hard to say. Anyways, before this Sunny City, I pick up a PP up, and this is actually important because Close Combat Earthquake and Rock Slide aren't known for their PP, and I can imagine that Lucario might have PP problems during the league because I've been using a lot of my restoring items throughout the playthrough to avoid Pokemon centers. I was noticing this by the time I reached the end of Volkner's gym, and I was starting to get a little bit worried. The Electric-type specialist got an intro just so he can cry. I crush his Pokemon and then I head into Victory Road. Here I pick up one more rare candy. This is the last one I'm collecting in the playthrough and I don't have to go out of my way to obtain it. I don't think I need to use them though before the rival or the Elite Four. Staraptor intimidates Lucario, I raise my attack to +1 with Swords Dance, and then Close Combat hits me doing more than half, so I cannot set up more than this. Rock Slide comes through, hitting the Staraptor, knocking it out, and I move on to the Infernape. Earthquake gets the one-shot. Yes, I am faster than his entire team as well. From there, I sweep his team, and let's just check in with the clock. It does look like Lucario is set to beat Giratina's time. That is, if it doesn't have any problems against the Elite Four. Errands first. This one's really straightforward. I just set up with Swords Dance, and then I can use all of my other moves to just one-shot his entire team. I don't really want to go through the specifics of it. I don't really think there is a way to lose here. His Pokemon don't have type coverage that is particularly good against Lucario, but the same cannot be said for Bertha. I figured that her Whiscash would be a good opportunity for me to set up because it loves Sandstorm. I go up to +2 and then I knock it out using Close Combat, but this wasn't a great choice. I think I should have used Earthquake. It probably still would have one hit, but I wouldn't have had the downsides of losing defensive stats. Hippowdon's next. I decided to go for Earthquake here, and it survives, hitting with Earthquake, and this does so much damage to Lucario. I was really surprised that it wasn't enough to get the knockout. I didn't anticipate the full restore and go for Swords Dance again, which would have been the best play. Instead I used Close Combat and now I'm locked in. This did not leave me feeling well when she sends in Galactic next. Close Combat does more damage when compared with Rock Slide, so I use it, and even though this move is not very effective, it still does enough. So will Earthquake be enough to take out the Golem and the Rhyperior? The Golem falls to a single hit, the Rhyperior comes in second, and it also goes down. I beat Bertha, but it was a lot closer than I was hoping for. Last time in Pokemon Platinum, I thought Flint was going to be bad because I was using Abomasnow, but in that case, he wasn't an issue, and so of course today with Lucario, he is once again not a problem. I'm faster than all of his Pokemon, and with just one Swords Dance, I one-hit all of his fire types. I might not have even needed the setup. I think Earthquake would have been powerful enough. Lucian also technically has a type advantage against me, but his Mr. Mime is not very good as a lead because it likes to set up and be more defensive, giving me time to increase my attack with Swords Dance. From there, the rest of his team is very straightforward. Technically, the Bronzong has Levitate and it usually survives a hit, but not today when I'm using Close Combat. I clean up the Espeon, and with that, I have made it to the champion. The time is around 2 hours and 15 minutes. Unless I get walled, I am going to beat Giratina's time. And I do want to draw your attention to the fact that I still have 5 rare candies in my bag. You might call it overconfident, but I didn't think Lucario was going to need them. So let's see if I can go into Cynthia saving rare candies. This is a first in my Pokemon Platinum series. Spiritomb is first and it does no Psychic, which is neutrally effective, but it still does very little damage because her Pokemon is more defensively oriented. It's the same problem that Lucian just had. I set up to +6, so this takes Lucario down to half health, but from there I think I should be able to sweep and win. I'm faster than all of her Pokemon, I'm able to one-shot the Spiritomb, which is one of her most defensive Pokemon. Then Lucario goes down to a single hit, Garchomp comes in next, Close Combat manages it. I do lose defenses by doing this, so I checked to see if she had any priority moves, but she doesn't. Due to that, I'm able to move first against the Togekiss. I choose Close Combat, Rock Slide has lower effective power, and it also could miss. My Milotic is next, Earthquake manages it, and that leaves only Roserade. I continue spamming A through Earthquake and knock it out. Lucario clocks in with a time of 2 hours, 16 minutes, and 7 seconds, with 2 resets, 2 blackouts for a total of 4 faults at level 73. This is a game time of 7 hours and 18 minutes. We're going to rank Lucario in just one moment, but I first want to say thank you to all my Patreon supporters and my supporters here through YouTube memberships. It really means the world to me that you have continued to support me as I am going into my 5th year doing solo challenges. Okay, so now let's talk about Lucario's results. I filmed this run before Shaman, so at the time it got the best placement overall, but now it's between Shaman Sky and Shaman Land in the 2nd place of my Platinum tier list. I think it's an interesting comparison between these two Pokemon because while Lucario has the lower real time, Giratina still has a significantly lower game time of only 6 hours and 28 minutes. This is partly because Giratina had more resets. After all, I was less experienced when I played it, but there's also a lot of room to wiggle with Giratina to get its time lower because it finished the game at level 75, which is higher than Lucario, and the Legendary definitely doesn't need that much training. Now I'm starting to get a better sense of what it's going to look like optimizing really excellent Pokemon in Platinum. Choosing which rare candies I'm going to pick up is going to be a major lever that I have to pull to get these times lower. Obviously with Lucario I should have skipped more because I could finish the game at an even lower level. Let's keep comparing game times because I think these metrics are more relevant after I had a major hardware upgrade mid-year. For Machamp it got a game time of 8 hours and 48 minutes, so Lucario was able to considerably outperform the other fighting type. Staraptor, which was played before the hardware upgrade, has a game time of 7 hours and 33 minutes. It's close to the top when ranked based on game time. By the way, just in case you're curious, here is that tier list so you can see the game time rankings. Laying things out this way, Giratina is in first, Lucario is in second, and surprisingly Bibarel is in 3rd place. It was honestly not that bad. Well, I'm just doing a little editor's insert here. Again, this is when I originally filmed it. Now Shaman Land and Shaman Sky have both surpassed Lucario, taking spots alongside Giratina in the S tier. But I want to find another Pokemon that might be able to compete for one of the top spots. chance. But the next Platinum video is going to be a Pokemon that should be good, but it really won't be because of the format I'm currently running. So next time in this series, we are going to see how the Garchomp line does in a solo playthrough of Pokemon Platinum. And yes, I will be starting as a Gible. It's probably going to be a brutal early game, at least until I collect a bunch of rare candies. Thanks so much for watching. If you made it this far, you're incredible. Daily December continues tomorrow. I'll see you then.